Hey there, YouTube. This is going to be a slightly different video. This is a video coaching review that somebody subscribed for on my website, jkaminski.com, and they checked the checkbox that said share with YouTube. So special thanks to Bruce on this video for allowing me to use this for content for my YouTube channel. This is exactly how a video coaching review goes, and he is a barebow shooter as well, so that's great to see. And basically helped him with some good form stuff and gave him some things that he can work on. And he responded with an email showing me that he has months of work to do before he submits a new video because I had so many suggestions. So it went quite well, I think. So if you're interested in a video coaching review, head to my website, jkaminski.com. And if you're interested in allowing other people to see your video coaching review so it'll help them learn and help them become better archers as well, don't hesitate to click the yes button within the checkout saying that, yes, I can use your video, and we can get it out there for more people to enhance their archery skills as well. Hey there, Bruce. Thank you for submitting a video coaching review. I really appreciate it. And so we're going to get right into it. I'm going to look at your questions first, and then we'll get into your shooting video. So thank you for sending me so many shots. That's excellent. Let's see here. You're having troubles maintaining consistent release. Results either a low arrow or a right arrow. Okay. I'll keep an eye on the video to see if I can point to anything in there. Length of time at draw, you release rather quickly. We'll take a look and we'll discuss the pros and cons to that. Back tension, you can't tell if you're using back tension most of the time. I will check that out. Sling is not that loose. I'll check that out as well. Doing archery for 3 years, pretty much barebow only. You want to shoot a 580 at a 720 at 50. Right now your personal best is 563, and your long-term goal is to be consistent over 600 at 50 meters. Okay, excellent. And you're also looking at, you've done Lancaster Classic and multiple local tournaments. Excellent. Okay, so I'll keep those questions and notes in mind. And let me move this over a little bit. That way you can see better. And we will get to your video. I already watched some of your video. I forgot how a lot of barebow shooters use the compound, bow pods on their limbs. And I just think that's funny. I forgot about that. So it looks like you're point on at 50, which is great. So I watched a fair amount of this video already just to check some stuff out, just to make sure I didn't miss anything in it, because he did send a fairly lengthy video here, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. I appreciate the full body shot, because a lot of people will crop out their hips and stuff, so I can't see where their feet are and how that's going. So what I noticed with your release, excuse me, is I did see some inconsistencies like you're mentioning. Sometimes the release would be more fluid and come back more. Sometimes it would be a bit of a hitch and it would kind of drop and come forward. That one, see how it snapped back a bit more? That one was better compared to the rest. So something to note before I really say much of a suggestion, because you can see, watch, it comes kind of down and back. Let's see if we can find another one with a different type of release. That one was good too, or at least the same. See, maybe the first one's a little different. So that one's slightly different. You can see overall a full change in your body position. Like, it didn't snap back and stop, because then after then there was this extra motion going on and lots of different movements compared to the other shot. So essentially, I'll explain to you so you can work as well in addition to what I'm going to suggest. Is basically, if you have a weak shot, if you pluck or collapse Pluck meaning you come off the string this way instead of nice and smooth back. If you pluck or collapse, you will hit to the right. As a right-handed shooter, as you are, you will hit towards the right. Now, potentially low as well, but I'm going to assume that the low shots are going to come more from how much you are pulling back. So if we use as a reference this first shot, the framing of the video itself, right before you release. Now, this is going to be on the same end, not a different end. So keep that in mind. The camera's not changing position. You don't move your feet once you're up on the line. Look at the gap here on this shot. So the edge of the frame to the tip of your elbow on this shot. This is right before you release. That's the frame before you release. All right. And this next shot, the frame before you release, less than a third of the gap here. So your draw length has actually changed, if I would assume. Now let's check here. Your arrow is maybe about an inch in front of your riser, and here your arrow is about an inch and a half in front of your riser. So definitely I would guess that your low impacts are from this shot right here would be a low impact, would be my guess, because every inch that we pull the bow back, you gain roughly 2 pounds of draw weight. So if you had like this was maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of change, so you're looking at right around 6-8 ounces of force that is different now on that arrow. And the arrows don't even weigh 6 or 8 ounces. They weigh much less than that. So the impact variance on the target, especially at 50 meters, is going to be really big if you don't have a consistent draw length. So what I would suggest, or what I think would help a lot, is simply in the manner that you are drawing the bow back. You get into a good position, you lock into a good position, you draw the bow back with good power, but then you come forward and you settle into the shot a lot. So as you draw, you can see this is going back in time. Look at now your elbow is behind the camera because you're more stretched out, and then you come back into it and relax and then let go. So I think what can happen, and you haven't done this before because you've only shot barebow, but there'd be no way that you could shoot like this with a clicker. Now, if you were to use a barebow clicker and the limb-driven clicker, of course you can, but doing it with this method or with a regular clicker off the point of an arrow, you would pull through the clicker every time you pulled back. So I have the luxury of being able to know how to shoot with a clicker. And what that does is it allows me to continually like pull and build pressure, right? And then I release. Whereas what you're doing is you're pulling to here, you're relaxing, you hold, and then you release, right? So what I see is that you pull to here, which is great. You get into, you use good power to get there, but then where you stop when you relax into it, you change slightly. And it's going to be difficult for you to feel the change in draw length due to that pull and then relax into it, in my opinion. I think that it would be best for you to pull to here and then hold and then shoot, not pull, relax, shoot, okay? Because I think what's going to happen is, well, draw length is definitely changing, as we can see, but also the power that you will build into the bow. Once you shoot a lot of arrows and you have the same draw length, then you take it to the next level of, so meaning as your draw length is changing now, the effects of what is going on is, as far as your impact point variance, is mostly the draw length change because it has a very large impact. But after you were to have the draw length be the same, then comes into play tension and direction, and the consistency of controlling that tension in the direction that is headed, right? And what I can see here with you is that it's mostly because of the way you pull back, but you have a change in tension and direction and it rears itself in your release. Sometimes it's nice and quick. Sometimes it's quick, but then there's extra disturbance going on because it's just not it's not a consistent buildup of that tension and direction. So if you eliminated the draw length issue, your groups would get better, but then they still wouldn't be as good as they could be due to the change of tension and direction. So I think that it would be best for you to build the draw length and get into position and then let it go. Not pull, then relax, and then shoot. I think that would be better. Let's see, this is a different end. Oh, you shifted forward. Might be a different end. Maybe you just change your foot position. So anyway, I would work on that first. That's definitely going to be of help. And then another thing that I am seeing, very common with barebow shooters, by the way, that I'm seeing this here. A lot of them in this position will start with the bow like this in front of them. And what I see as an issue, and it may be different when you're string walking indoors, but because you're point on, you just grab under the arrow and you're good to go. But if you look at your shoulders here, you can see how your bow shoulder is quite low, draw shoulders neutral, maybe slightly high, but definitely depressed on this side. That's because of where you're holding the bow in space like this. And why that's something of concern is because as you go to lift, watch your whole body have to rock like that. And not only are you rocking, but even right before you lift, you kind of lean towards the target, drop this bow shoulder more, and then you lift up, right? And so what is happening is a lot of motion and a lot of movement going on. And I think that, in my opinion, when a lot of movements and a lot of changes are happening, you'll have less ability to notice when there is a change happening. So meaning, because there's this huge motion going on here, if your shoulder is barely higher on one shot than all the others, you may be less likely to notice that it's slightly higher, and then you wouldn't be able to say, okay, I'm going to start over and let down and start my shot over, right? So if you were to remove this extra movement going on, especially with that front shoulder, you'll be able to notice more changes when things are happening that aren't supposed to be happening, and you'll be able to catch them sooner, which is better. So I would work on starting with a much more neutral stance. You know, you load your arrow with the bow on your toe, totally acceptable and fine. Many people do that. But when I pick up my bow from here and I go to set my fingers on the string and get my hand in the grip, I take this bottom limb and I put it on the inside of this knee here. And then this middle section of the limb kind of rests on top of my quad, on top of my kneecap on this side. And it's just kind of a nice place to hold my bow, and it keeps my shoulders level because it puts my grip up at a relatively comfortable height. I actually just coached somebody locally that was doing this same exact thing. They had wrist pain that they developed because they actually were, well, they were pointing even further down than you are so they could see where their string crawl was really accurately. But then they would try to put their hand into the bow when it was straight down, and it was like having to bend backwards like this and putting all sorts of pressure on their wrist. And I said, look, you're not even flexible to begin with, and now you're trying to ask your body to do something that it really can't do. Why don't you just put your bow up on your knee like I'm suggesting you to do? And it actually fixed a bow shoulder issue that was going on too. So I think that you'd be a bit more comfortable if you put this bottom limb on the inside of your thigh over here and then hooked the rest of this limb on top of this leg, and it just kind of sits there. And because you're tied to the bow with your sling and all that, you're totally fine, and I don't see any issues there. So now something that I am noticing is that it looks to me like you are peeking or wanting to peek. So what peeking is if I'm shooting and you're my target and I go to let go, I want to see where that arrow is going, or I want to see where it's flying. So watch your head. You can see about a half a second after you let go, you're already kind of looking to see, oh, where did my arrow go? Where did it impact? Maybe you're looking at it flying. I'm guilty of that. When I shot 90 meters, when we used to shoot 90 meters, I'd shoot and watch that arrow fly because I had a guess. I could tell if it was going to be a 10 depending on how it was flying, you know? So, guilty here. So it's best to see you're kind of, even when you let go, you open your eyes and you're trying to see where that arrow's going. And it's not going to lend itself to consistency because you're adding this disconnect, this change when you are letting go instead of staying focused on the target. I don't know if you watched the video coaching review mock-up that I did for my wife, but I put that up on YouTube, and she was doing something very similar where she was actually closing her eyes when she let go, which is kind of the opposite of peeking, but I think it was because the string was hitting her in their nose. Either way, it's not ideal. What you should be doing is staring and burning a hole in your target where you want your arrow to go with your eyes. So it's called eye focus. And what that's going to do and what that will give you as far as a benefit goes is it will allow your subconscious to kind of take over and make those small last minute finite super small adjustments to throw that arrow in the middle if it's not going to head there because you're slightly misaligned or something. You know, our subconscious is extremely powerful, and when we have these small little changes, it really just makes a huge difference, and it'll only really happen if you're staring and burning a hole in the target with your eyes. And you know, you asked about your sling being a little too short. I don't see a problem because you're not grabbing the bow anyway. You know, it's up to you. For me, it's a little short. I'd make it a little longer so it's not holding on to the bow, just in case it's not adding any sort of tension or any sort of, you know, extra torquing or controlling over my bow on accident. So this was what made me laugh, because I forget that they use those bow pods. You're yelling at Google. Let's see here. See, that one was much better actually with the peaking. Much less of it. At least it took a lot longer for you to actually look for where that arrow is going. I don't like it, and I think it's common because shooting is fun, and it's fun to watch the arrows fly, and of course we want to see where the arrow impacts. But what really needs to happen is you need to be internally focused on analyzing how that shot went, how it felt, how did the release feel, where did my follow-through go to? Was it nice and solid, or did it go like this? And then was there more disturbance? Did I feel like I was fully locked in my back, or maybe I was not? And you have to analyze first inside of you and then see where the arrow impacts. Because if you're looking to see where the arrow impacts before you've analyzed what's going on inside of you, you're going to associate impact points first and then secondary your feeling. Whereas what could happen and what should happen is internalize those feelings, be like, okay, it felt like shot X, whatever, the way that X shot always feels, okay? And then you look and you're like, yep, the arrow impact within the group. And the arrow, you know, it's good to go, right? And then you keep shooting, and as that progresses, you'll notice, okay, when I collapse or when I pluck, I tend to shoot high right. Or when I'm not fully engaged in my back, I hit low. And then so you can keep noticing those changes as you are focused internally. So then when it comes to like a tournament, or it comes to a day where it's like you got a group and then all of a sudden there's an arrow sitting low, and then you're scratching your head like, well, that shot felt good. And then you kind of associate and you think back, you're like, when I, in practice, focus on myself, if I hit low, typically it's because I wasn't fully in my back, or that arrow hits to the right and you're like, that shot felt pretty good, but I might be collapsing a little bit. So you can use it as a reference to basically keep you in check live, right? So as you're shooting and you notice one goes awry and you say, oh, that felt good, but then, okay, well, the next shot I want to make sure either way that it's real strong or I finish good or whatever it is. And so you can actually kind of self-police yourself and self-coach yourself in real time as the tournament is going on. Only though, if you focus on your internal stuff first and then use the target as your secondary view. I know with Barebow, it's difficult to do that because there are so many factors that can change, unlike in Olympic style recurve, because of the draw length change, the potential target panic changes, string walking changes, accidentally string walking too much or too little or whatever. It changes everything. So as barebow shooters, we want to see how the arrow impacted first so we can make those adjustments right away. You got to do that internally first, then check the target, and then deduce what you can find from there, in my opinion. It's just a total different change, and it's fairly difficult to do so because of the game that is barebow. But that's why we choose to shoot it, because it's a bit freeing. Let's see here. So it's good. I like that you address the target before you pull the bow back. That's going to help, allow your body to do everything naturally. So I believe that you'll get there quickly with comfort if you were to put that limb up on your knees, so you don't have to worry about that shoulder being so low, and then that extra rock as you're picking the bow up, and then you'll be able to notice changes more. So even from this view, you can see your change of when you're shooting, the bow is moving a bit away from the target towards the right, and your head's kind of heading to the left right away as you release. There's a slight delay there, so you've got a bit control, but as that one was much better with the head control. However, the release had that double hitch going on, and that could be from many different things. See, it's got one, let's see, where's your elbow head? Goes down, then it pauses a little bit, and then you start coming around more so with your hand than your elbow. And what I want to suggest is trying to have a bit more focus on your scapula, or a bit more focus on this back shoulder area, the entire back half of your shoulder, being more of the driving force of how you are pulling the bow back and how you are exerting forces onto your bow and how you feel at full draw. I think that if you focus more here and less on your hand, you will have more consistent draw length and more consistent releases as well. So what I see on this, if you watch your hand and elbow relation, so when I say elbow, I mean the tip of your elbow, because the tip of your elbow is directly connected to your shoulder basically, whereas your hand is disconnected by your wrist and forearm, and all your fingers are separate. Well, watch the relationship between your elbow and your hand as you release here. See how it's kind of moving independent of the back half? And so what I feel like is happening is you're focusing on your hand instead of your shoulder, and you can make your hand do something, but your shoulder may not want to do it if you're not moving correctly. So if you look at that release, your shoulder and elbow move back in more of a fluid motion, and then your hand just kind of hangs out there in space. I like, despite the slight outward motion of your hand through release, I like this release better because it's more fluid and more powerful, whereas the other one was more disconnected and jumpy. And what that is showing me is your focus on the back half is really from what I can tell, based on what the release is telling me, is you're pulling with this portion of your hand, and that's really what is setting the preliminary tension and direction of the shot. And instead of it being built up into your back, which would allow itself to be very consistent automatically, and allow the hand to just kind of do its thing, I'm seeing a fight between the two. And if you really focus more on your back and loading more into your back, and coming around more with your back, I think your draw length will be consistent, and I think your release will be more consistent, and I think that you will have more back tension. You asked about back tension and still weren't sure if you were using it most of the time, and I can tell it's mostly how you pull back. So that one, you just kind of sunk into it and pulled back, and now we'll see what your release looks like. That one was still better than the others. You may have gotten lucky, may not, I'm not sure. It's one of those things that I can't really tell you. Well, part of it is I can't give you too much guidance on it because I'm not there in person, so I can't kind of bounce ideas off of you in real time. But what I can tell you is that you can really just kind of monitor what is going on and how the release feels and where the arrows impact then, of course, as compared shot to shot. And then you'll be able to see, okay, do I feel more in my back, less in my back? Did I focus more on my shoulder? Did I focus more on my hand and my anchor? And so on. So it's one of those things that are going to need you to focus on progressing the building of the tension and direction. I would suggest using this to lead with and pull the bow back and lead with that portion more. Let's see another end here. I would also try to integrate more of the chest down motion, the dropping of the chest, to be able to be a bit more aggressive in your stance. I see your balance when you're at full draw. You can see you're very vertical. If I draw a line from the top of your head straight down, it's pretty much right between your feet right here. Even if so, a little bit more weight on your heels. Try to shift your weight a bit more forward to the balls of your feet. It'll be a bit more of an aggressive stance. You'll be able to grip the ground with your toes and be able to make small finite adjustments, especially when the wind starts coming around, and you'll be a lot more stable. Now, the way you do that is not by leaning forward. I have a video that I made. It's I believe it's stance and posture in the set position, stance, and posture. I talk about how we get our center of gravity or whatever towards the ball of our feet. It actually shifts forward, so it's not between our legs, but it's forward towards our toes. And that happens from just dropping our chest. And I would highly suggest checking that video out. But in a nutshell, the way that I do it is once I have my hook and grip set on my bow, I take a deep breath into my chest. It raises my chest up, and then I blow it out, and I slump. I have poor posture then. I sink down into the chair or into my let my shoulders sink down. And what that does is it drops my chest. So from this position, if I breathe in, it lifts up and then drops. And so now my chest is dropped and I'm in poor posture. But what that does is it shifts my weight further forward over my toes, and then that allows me to have the proper posture and the proper alignment. So what would happen is your chest would be dropped a bit more. You'll be able to get more into your back. This elbow will be down and around a bit more, and your alignment will be better too. Because right now you're kind of sitting back and up like this, as opposed to sitting down into more of an aggressive stance. This is you, and then more down. So not up, down. It's just a simple shift of the rib cage, basically, is what I would suggest. Because if the wind came from the right here, you're going to be real unstable. It's going to want to push you really hard to the left, and won't be as pleasant as it could be, to say the least. So, see another shot from this angle before we check out from behind. I like that you have a thermocell back here. Yeah, so now you asked about quick release. You release pretty quick. I don't see an issue with it necessarily if everything is consistent. But I can tell that you're dealing with consistencies in your release and follow through and draw length and all these things anyway. So what I would suggest is to try and make sure you feel what you should at full draw. whatever that focus of feeling or thought is. It could be how the cue to shoot, or whatever. For me, I want to feel more in my back. I want to feel more tension in my back. I want to feel more engaged in my back here. I want to feel tension and power built up in my posterior delt and that type of area. And that will give me more ability to have power built into the system. And it is really, I use it as my cue or my check for how consistent my draw length is, right? And with you releasing so quick, you may not be able to recognize the change of your draw length from shot to shot. And that could be the cause of why you're unable to decipher the difference as to why you had an arrow hit low, why you had an arrow get in the middle, right? So I believe, if I would be bold, I would say that I would hold a little bit longer and try to feel like you are in the same, you have the same power, you have the back coming around and behind as much as possible, or something along those lines. And even on that shot, sometimes you have a tendency to creep a little bit. And again, I think that has to do with just how you are setting up and getting into the shot itself. There's not enough building up of tension. You pull back great, but then you lose a lot of that power that you've built up. I'm not saying your draw length needs to be longer, for the record. Your end position is okay. I would like to see a little bit more around and behind. You clearly have the flexibility because you demonstrate that with how you pull back. But if I were to just say what I would change, I would build up to where you are and then release. Not pulling back to get to here, then release, okay? So, but if you could also get into more alignment, you'd have a bit more draw length and a bit more power into the system too. That's good. But it's not a necessity. It's not something that I say is an absolute must. I only say this because many people, many coaches out there will say there's only this way. I'm not going to tell you that that's true. It's definitely not true. So I'm just trying to give you as much as I can to help you as much as I can within the limits that we've got going on. So you can see, right, let me go back. See, when you're at full draw, look at where your scapula is, and this posterior deltoid is much more engaged and around. But then as you come into anchor, see how you lose it all? And now you're not in your back as much. You don't have as much back tension. You're not in as good of alignment. If you were to keep what you had what you built up, and then come into anchor and keep that and then release, you'd be much better off, in my opinion. More consistent with your draw length. And then, so if you really watch from here as I'm arrowing forward, watch your elbow. Compare it to the trees in the background. Moving forward, creep, shot breaks. So what I'm going to guess is that shot definitely hit low. Your release was pretty fluid back, so I'm not going to guess that one hit right, but I'm definitely going to guess it hit low. So that would be my guess on that. Is it just purely draw length is why you're hitting low? There's a little bit of excess tension built up in your bow hand that I see. So work on relaxing that. You got a lot of thumb twitching and finger twitching going on. You're not actually gripping the bow. And it looks to me like you're trying to just make sure it's nice and relaxed. But I would do all that relaxing down in this position here. As you hook the bow, set your hand in its final position and don't move it. See, now that one you didn't creep before you let go. So I'm going to guess that one went in the middle. Again, it all has to do with your draw length, your buildup of tension and direction, your buildup of power into the system of the bow. So really just keep coming around. You always have to add or always have to build pressure into the system as you are going to shoot before you release and follow through. Again, that one you creeped a little bit more compared to the other. Overall, your structure here looks good. I like wide stances. You're centered over your spine, centered over your feet. That's great. Just like I said, drop that chest cavity a little bit. Try to shift that weight towards your feet a little bit more. It'll allow you to get into your back and around and behind a bit more. Again, I really like the way you pull the bow back. You just lose that little bit. So I'm glad to see that you're not careful with pulling the bow back. You're aggressive and into it. Just keep that tension that you built up back here the whole time. See this hand twitching a little bit, but it doesn't move at all after the shot. So like I said, I think your hand is okay. I would just maybe relax them down a bit more instead of like this, because you kind of have tension like this into your hand. Hands don't normally sit like this. If you relax them, they sit more in a fist. You know, when we sleep mostly with our hands like this. Unfortunately, sometimes I'll sleep like this because flexors are stronger than extensors. But just relax your fingers down that little bit. You can see them reaching and wiggling and stuff. That's indicative of too much tension in the bow hand itself. So just kind of let it relax and push into the grip down here and just let it sit there in your hand with these fingers nice and relaxed instead of kind of like that. You know, if it was up to me, I would rotate my hand a little bit clockwise a little bit more so my knuckles were more at a 45-degree angle and it'd be a bit more of a natural position like this, like I suggest stop and then the fingers down instead of holding it more like that. It looks to me like you have relatively large hands, so you're able to keep most of your thumb on the grip as it is, and it looks like you've built up a custom grip too. So I wouldn't worry too much, but I think if you went from here to here, a bit more in this natural stop position, it'll be a bit stronger and a bit more consistent as well. Let's get this last view here. So you can really see from this angle the peaking that you want to go on. I don't think your release is really all that bad. I think that you have a tendency to want to see where the arrow goes as, again, your primary driving factor of how the shot itself went. And so it looks like you're plucking, but I don't think you are. See, that one's nice and clean and you didn't peak. That was a good release. Whereas the previous shot that was shown, your hand just kind of came out, but you also did this because you wanted to see where that arrow went. Now, it might have been because the shot was bad. It might have been because you didn't like the feel of the shot, or at least subconsciously you didn't. So then you're like, where did it go? I want to see where it went. And so you're moving your hand this way and bow this way so you can see where that arrow goes and how it's flying. It could be just subconscious, and you may not even know that you're doing it. But we'll see if this happens on this one. That one was halfway in between. Nice and fluid, but then kind of came out. Again, I think it's just because you're focused on the hand and not focused on the back. If you focus more on the back as you release and come around like this, the hand's going to move along with it. If you focus only on the hand, I can do all sorts of stuff. If my hand were to come back, I can do that like this. I can do that, all sorts of different ways and change everything back here. But if I focus on only back here and just let my hand follow, it will be very consistent. Or could be very consistent. See how that one just straight out? You didn't peek, but it sure looks like you want to look where that arrow's going instead of driving with your shoulder and feeling the internal forces built up. You're relatively new. You said 3 years. 3 years is new in archery, and I can tell you have a decent foundation, but you're still not quite there. You got to focus more on yourself. Focus way less on the target. Try to make every shot the same. If you can, so my whole premise is you shoot the bow shoots the arrow. If you're shooting the bow consistently, the bow will deliver the arrow consistently. So that means more groups. So really just trying to drive everything with yourself. Focus on yourself, control your position, maintain everything exactly the same. Draw the bow back in the same manner, have the same draw length, have the same power, the same tension that you've built up in your shoulders, and then keep that tension going in the same direction every single shot. Try to control that as much as you possibly can, and groups should show themselves up, especially at 50 meters. You've got to be consistent with your draw length. You've got to be consistent with the marks that you hit. You've got to be consistent with where you end up in your structure. And then your focus has to be the same as well. You have to be focused internally, less focus on the target. overall, I can see that you're searching here, and that's a good thing. So just try to integrate those couple things and let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask after you see this video and after you review it. And I'm happy to answer your questions in addition to this for sure. So please feel free to respond. And let's see, let's go over your questions really quick. So both shoulder, arm, and hand in correct position. I didn't really directly address that. Yeah, the only thing would be your hand. Rotate it a little bit clockwise. Get those knuckles at a 45-degree angle. The lifeline here, the edge of the grip should be here. So all of the bow should be in this side, not in this side. I see you may have a little bit of the part of your heel on the grip there. I'm going to say maybe you don't because you do have decently large hands. Length of time of draw we talked about, consistent release we talked about, back tension we talked about, sling we talked about, and that should be it. So yeah, like I said, if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Happy to answer them, and thank you again for submitting a video coaching review. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, consider hitting the like button, the subscription button, and the notification bell. And if you're interested in supporting my channel, head to my website, jkaminski.com, where you can find information on Patreon, apparel, books, and digital coaching as well.